We're back at One Madison. We'll continue the discussion. Now we're going to focus on workforce transformation and the impacts of AI on the human capital management. We're here with Jill Goldstein, who's the Global Managing Partner for HR and Talent Transformation at IBM Consulting. Thanks, Jill, for taking some time with us.
Thank you.
So the workforce, there's a lot of stuff going on, right? We get back to office, AI is taking my job. What's the state of the state with the workforce today?
Well, I will tell you that the workforce is actually really excited about the idea of leaning in and helping to rethink the way that business is accepting technology, specifically AI. And the most successful organizations are those that are asking the workforce to be part of rethinking ways of working and being part of the change.
I mean, I buy that. I don't know if you remember the RPA wave?
Yes.
Everybody was all free. But when you talk to people who actually adopted RPA, they loved it. At first they were concerned. And I think there's a similar dynamic here. Maybe it's, times 100 or 1,000 because we can all touch these LLMs, whereas RPA was a little bit kind of back office. But do you think that's a similar dynamic, at least in that sense, that people, once they touch it and realize the benefits of taking away some of that mundane, day-to-day drudgery, they fall in love with it?
Absolutely. I mean, actually inside of IBM, one of the first things that we did when generative AI really became very popular is we challenged our workforce to opt into a workforce challenge, an old school hackathon, where we asked them to roll up their sleeves and reimagine how they would work with a digital buddy, with generative AI helping them in their day-to-day activities. We had hundreds of thousands of IBMers leaning in and rethinking about how they were doing that work. And because they got to be part of the discussion, there was a level of excitement, and the adoption was actually a lot quicker than what we're seeing in other organizations.
So you guys obviously have a lot of experience internally, and you can bring that to your customers. Can you take us through sort of a little bit more detail what you did, how that helped transform your human capital management operation?
Sure. So the first thing that IBM did, and we did this years ago, was we made a visible commitment to responsible AI through trust and transparency. If you go on to IBM.com, you'll see our principles, our values associated with responsible AI. That commitment is external as well as internal. We also have a governance model that really allows us internally to have transparency into the way that we're applying AI into our internal operations. It gives us as employees confidence of how we will use AI, but equally as important, how we won't use AI. Because of that, I think there's a trust in the workforce and a commitment on how we're going to make sure that the workforce has a feeling of comfort about how their data is being used and how their job will be impacted. The second thing we did was exactly what I mentioned about that hackathon, that challenge. And the third thing IBM did that was spectacular is invested in increasing the technical acumen of the entire workforce. So that this way, individually, I understand what's happening in the news around me when we start talking about LLMs. I understand how to engage with my supplier who is introducing artificial intelligence into the platform that I'm using day in and day out. And even as an HR professional, I feel more confident in talking to my IT counterparts about what the future of AI is. Those are three things that IBM did across the entire workforce that helped us.
Oh, interesting. So you had to partner up with the technical folks.
That's right.
And so that what they could sort of ensure the governance and the guardrails, that was their role. You kind of shared with them the outcomes that you wanted, and then they kind of made it happen with their technical magic.
Absolutely. One of the things that our IBM HR department did very early on was to take some of our functional experts and start to teach them technical stuff so that we could create what I call purple squirrels. Those people who have a unique set of skills that may be unavailable in the marketplace more generally, so that they can speak function and then turn around and speak technical. By doing that, we've been able to, I think, accelerate our digital transformation journey, which has been powered by AI. In our particular case, it's watsonx Orchestrate, but it is a similar pattern that we're seeing across other organizations.
There's always some trepidation. Where was the trepidation? Was it within the HR department thinking, oh wow, I'm going to be out of a job? Or was it in the employee base, wow, I have to change how I'm doing things? And how did you overcome that?
So with the HR function, it was about making sure that they had the skills they needed for the new venture of their career, giving them options, giving them access to the resources they need to reskill themselves, and then giving them opportunities to advance their career path. As was mentioned before by Glenn, what we did with the workforce, though, was a little bit more of forced adoption, right? Again, not something that I would recommend for all organizations, but what we did was we cut off many other access channels so that the only way for an employee to initially access HR was through what we call AskHR, which is a digital front end to our HR organization. It matured over time. When we first introduced AskHR, our NPS scores plummeted.
Really?
They did. They plummeted.
That must have been stressful.
It was super stressful, but the team hopped right on it, right? They were super agile. They spent time understanding content, understanding feedback, and would introduce improvements within 24 hours rather than waiting for traditional quarterly releases. And little by little, NPS went up. And I think the team would share with you right now that we are dangerously close to pivoting over 80 on our NPS.
Wow.
So it's spectacular.
Wow, that's like Apple NPS. I mean, that's tremendous.
It's amazing. The team has done a great job.
Congratulations. And you were alluding to, you were able to use your own internal tools. You talked about IBM's own AI. So you sipping your own champagne.
Yes.
Okay, we'll go
Yes.
there. So you were able to apply that. So you kind of had a head start. How did you deal with the communications and the change management?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is we're fortunate enough that we have executive sponsorship. And when I tell you we have executive sponsorship, our famous ghost shopper is our CEO and chairman. It is not unusual for Arvind to go on to AskHR and be self-sufficient, actually testing the same access channels that the workforce uses on a regular basis. So when you know the chairman may actually be part of the NPS pool, there's special attention paid.
Undercover boss.
That definitely helps with adoption. When you know when the CEO is testing it, sipping the same champagne, you tend to be a little bit stronger on adoption. The second thing is, it's good. It's good. If I need someone, I can still get someone, right? When I go on to AskHR, there's a big button that says, do you need to talk to somebody now? Is it urgent? And if I press that button, typically I get a call back or an outreach within 10 seconds. The difference is the outreach is from the right person in the right time zone with the right subject matter expertise and the right access to resources, rather than going to a generalist who then has to figure it out.
Have you now had other parts of the organization flock to you for learnings, which door not to go through, and what are some of the learnings that you might be able to share with us?
So last year, we introduced Ask IBM.
Okay.
Right? Following HR's success, we had Ask IT pop up, Ask Finance, and what we had found out is that we had unintentionally recreated old school automated call distribution, right? And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to minimize the burden that we had shifted to the employees to figure out which ask to go to. So we introduced Ask IBM. And so I, as an IBMer, just have to go on to Ask IBM to get a question answered. It's that aggregate learning that we're taking to our customers that they're really excited about, right? When you spoke to Tony and you spoke to Glenn, they all talked about the value and excitement we get from our Client Zero story. That's the Client Zero story that resonates so well with our clients.
And you're interpreting the customer, in this case it's maybe an internal employee, but their needs based upon a natural language interaction. You're not giving me, I love these IVR systems where you have like so many conditioned response choices. You have to actually write them down. Number two, well, it's not quite two, but it might be. I'll write that down. It might go back to two. It's just talk to me. I'm going to interpret that, infer, and then you said it's getting better is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, the one thing I would mention is that a lot of HR organizations take the way they're organized in the back office, and that's the way they push the access channels out to their workforce. The key here is that the experience needs to be designed based on the consumer who's accessing the information or transacting business. It needs to anticipate my spoken or unspoken intention as a candidate, employee, a manager, an HR partner, an alumni. That's really when adoption is less of a heavy lift and something organically that happens because I know I'm going to get the level of service that I expect.
But it really is carrot and stick, right? You had a sort of a forced adoption because you pulled the plug on the old ways of doing things, but then you kind of made it useful and in a way fun and productive for employees.
And I would say that was because when we first started, we did exactly what I suggested most organizations did. Right? They took the way that HR was organized in the back office, and that was the way they pushed the information through AskHR. They learned very quickly that in order for the adoption to be seamless, for people to want to use AskHR as the first point of contact, they needed to totally rethink the way that AskHR was presented to me as an employee.
So as you go to clients
Yes.
who want to transform their own HR interactions and department, et cetera, where should they start? Would you recommend that they, dive in and pull the plug if they have the appetite for it? Let's start there and then let's go to some that are more mature.
So the first thing they should do is get a handle on what those available access channels are and how they're using them today, and are they using them to their fullest? So that would be the first thing I would suggest, even with organizations who haven't gone on a very thoughtful, planned strategic journey, is they already have some breadcrumbs there that they can use. That would be the first thing. The second thing would be to understand where your organization's pain points or opportunities are right now as it relates to the workforce. I will tell you generally, as we talk across clients, across industries, across geographies, there tends to be opportunities where employees are joining the company, leaving the company, or transferring roles within the company. So although there may be some specific to the organization, those three tend to be pretty consistent across the organization. So that is typically where organizations will start. You'll hear them talk about onboarding new joiners. And then the third is for those organizations who are more mature that realize that employee intention doesn't arbitrarily start or stop in the context of HR. It's across the entire enterprise. And so an employee may want to know the status of an expense report. It's an employee inquiry that doesn't typically reside within HR. And so when you're really redesigning the experience based on the voice of the consumer, these arbitrary back office silos disappear, and you are really thinking about the entire enterprise.
The onboarding and the offboarding and the one in between is sort of moving within the company. How transformative was this initiative to those sort of pieces of the puzzle? I mean, onboarding, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's pretty a pretty well-known process, but maybe not. Maybe it's a little bit different for different countries. And so I'm curious as to were those like exceedingly transformed or not so much because you understood it better?
When was the last time you were a new joiner?
Yeah.
Right? So what happens in many cases is the new joiner shows up day one and they have actual or virtual paperwork that they have to complete.
Right. Yep.
They don't have a workspace available. They haven't gone through training. They don't have their safety equipment. They don't know what their schedule is. And the manager of that new joiner has a checklist that may like 20 items long of things they needed to get to but didn't. And so the new joiner experience is horrible. They're not being productive. They're not servicing your clients on day one. For the first few weeks, they're catching up on things that could have been done before their actual first day.
Right.
So when you rethink the new joiner experience, you engage with that new joiner as they're accepting an offer to become part of your organization. You invite them to be part of your community where legally permissible. You ask them to do some training. You help them engage and give them visibility that you're setting up and being prepared for them. You maybe even send them instructions on how to get to your building with the availability of public transportation and available parking. It shifts from being an administrative process to an experience where the person feels valued that they're coming, and they're actually productive day one, which is pretty good for the organization.
That's huge. That is great. Thank you for that description. Do you golf?
I do not.
No, I don't really golf either, but there's a term called a mulligan, right? If you have to, it's a do-over. If you had a mulligan, what would you do differently?
A lot of organizations have transformed their HR function through the deployment of Cloud HCM, Workday, SuccessFactors, Oracle HCM. And they did it because they wanted to modernize their organization and provide their HR organization and workforce with access to tools. But in retrospect, as they think about that deployment, they treated it a little bit too much like a technology deployment and not an enabler of a fuller transformation. So they didn't review policies, they didn't do end-to-end process, they didn't think about their data dictionary, they certainly didn't think about their experience. And so they're now looking at this big investment and they're not realizing the value they got from it. So the one thing I would suggest organizations do first is to figure out how to maximize their investment and take advantage of capabilities like AI and generative AI that are organically available to them. Marry it with different parts of the enterprise, like Microsoft Teams or ServiceNow, and then also consider how to orchestrate all that together with the benefits of watsonx Orchestrate. I mean, I really think it's a beautiful recipe for success, but they need to start with their Cloud HCM where most of the data and organic capability exists.
That's such an important point you're making, and it's actually in your title, because your title is HR and Talent Transformation, because you're right. That's our industry, we would say, okay, well, you got core HR, and over here you have talent management, and those are separate things, and we've got separate software for that. Do you want to buy some? And it's like, well, wait a minute, and you have a different perspective on that, really a whole system view.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, organizations are not deploying technology for the sake of deploying technology. They're doing that for business value. And the only way you're going to get the business value is to treat it as a transformation rather than just a technology deployment.
Super exciting times, Jill. Thank you so much
course.
for sharing your stories with us. Really appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
You bet. All right, keep it right there. We'll be back right after this short break. I'm Dave Vellante, and you're watching theCUBE.